Hi everyone, today we're about to witness what happens when power, pride, and prejudice crash into grace, restraint, and resolve in the middle of a crowded restaurant. The most shocking part, no one raised their voice. No fists flew, but the impact was unforgettable. This could happen to anyone, even you. So before we dive into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. It was a crisp Thursday evening in downtown Minneapolis. Just after 6:30 p.m., the sidewalks were bustling with a mix of lawyers wrapping up their last calls and couples heading out for dinner reservations they booked weeks in advance. Hollings and Pine, a restaurant tucked inside a sleek glass-fronted building on Marquette Avenue, was alive with the warm hum of silverware on ceramic and the smooth notes of a saxophone cover of Stevie Wonder's "Knocks Me Off My Feet" playing low above the chatter. Nia Whitaker, 28, wove through the tightly spaced tables like she'd been born doing it. Tight black apron, black non-slip shoes hair, pulled back into a soft bun that said, "I'm here to work, not perform." This was her third year on the job. She didn't flirt for tips, didn't ask personal questions. She just made sure your water glass stayed full, your steak came out exactly medium rare, and your check was discreetly placed without ruining the mood. By now, she'd memorized most of the regulars, the couple who always ordered the beet salad and a bottle of Malbec, the trio of women from the marketing firm across the street who rotated through bad dates and good gossip, even the older gentleman who always asked for the far corner booth so he could read his mystery novel in peace. But tonight, she noticed someone new. Table 9, prime real estate right by the wine rack and the frosted glass divider near the kitchen. A man was seated alone when Nia first passed by, tall, expensive-looking navy suit, Apple Watch, gleaming haircut that probably cost more than her weekly grocery run. He was staring at his phone, scrolling with fast, frustrated flicks, jaw clenched. A few minutes later, a woman joined him, tall, elegant, maybe late 30s. She didn't take off her coat. Nia figured she'd give them a few minutes to settle. She was taking dessert orders at table 3 when it started. A sharp voice, louder than it needed to be. "Hello, hello, is anyone working tonight, or are you just hiding behind the bar?" She glanced over her shoulder. It was table 9. Of course. The voice had weight to it, like someone who was used to getting attention, used to being obeyed. She excused herself from table 3 with a smile, jotting down the chocolate lava cake and decaf coffee on her pad before walking over to him. "Good evening, sir," she said, keeping her tone even and pleasant. "Apologies for the delay. We've been a bit swamped." He didn't look at her. Not really, just waved his hand like he was swatting away an excuse. "I've been sitting here for 12 minutes. Understood. Thank you for your patience. Can I get you both started with water, sparkling or still?" That's when he looked up directly into her face. His eyes narrowed just slightly. "You can get me a server who knows how to prioritize high-profile guests," he said, voice like ice. "Not someone who forgets who pays the bill." There it was, the first jab. She absorbed it like she'd done 100 times before. Not flinching, not freezing, just nodding. "I'll be happy to take care of you," she said. Sparkling or still? The woman across from him was still, quiet eyes glued to the wine list, like it was the most compelling thing she'd ever read. Nia wondered how many times she'd sat through this kind of dinner. He didn't answer her question. Just said, "You know who I am." She paused, pen still in hand. "No, sir." "I don't." He smirked. "Bryce Calloway. Ever heard of Callaway Motors smart car tech, worth more than every bottle in your cellar combined?" Nia gave the faintest nod. "Still or sparkling, Mr. Calloway?" The smirk dropped. He let out a low, humorless laugh. "You've got nerve. That's new. Most people can't wait to fall over themselves once they recognize me." She wrote down sparkling without asking again and turned to the woman. "And for you?" The woman glanced up briefly. "Still water, please." Nia nodded and walked off, not hurrying, not dragging, just smooth, quiet efficiency. She could feel his eyes burning into her back. She dropped the order at the bar and kept moving. There were tables to reset, bread to restock, and a couple waiting on their check. But even as she moved, she could feel it. The pressure, like a thundercloud, was starting to build. Table 9 right at its center. Bryce Calloway had walked into that restaurant expecting to be treated like royalty. What he got instead was patience, professionalism, and not an ounce of fear. And for men like him, that's sometimes the greatest insult of all. By the time Nia returned with the water, the air around table 9 was already charged. She placed the glasses down, folded a napkin cleanly at the edge, and offered her warmest smile. Would you like to hear our specials this evening? Bryce didn't even look at her. No. I'd like to know who trained you to act like that. Do you think this is good service? You ignore me, then treat me like I'm the janitor. Nia blinked once. I assure you, I treat all of our guests with the same courtesy. He leaned forward, finally locking eyes again. That's the problem. There it was. Just vague enough to deny later, just sharp enough to cut now. The kind of sentence that comes loaded with everything someone like him thinks, but won't say outright. Nia didn't answer. She didn't need to, because what came next was going to be louder than anything he'd say, and it wouldn't involve raising her voice. Bryce Calloway leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the backrest, like a king surveying a subject who didn't understand the rules of his court. The woman across from him, Olivia, offered a polite smile to Nia, but it was the kind of smile that said, I'm not here to cause trouble, but I won't help stop it either. Nia didn't let her hands shake. She didn't break eye contact. She just took a calm breath, held the silence for half a second longer than most people could tolerate, and said simply, Would you like to place your order, or should I give you a few more minutes? Bryce laughed loudly. Too loudly. Are you hearing this? He asked Olivia, gesturing dramatically with his hand. She thinks she's clever. Isn't that adorable? Olivia said nothing. You know, he continued now, directing his performance to the nearby tables, as much as Nia in my company. This kind of attitude would get you replaced in a heartbeat. You don't talk back to the people who sign your check. Nia stood still, pen in hand, posture relaxed but unwavering. I'm not talking back, sir. I'm asking a question. Oh, don't start with semantics, he snapped. You know exactly what you're doing. That little smug attitude. The whole above-it-all routine. It's pathetic. Several diners nearby had stopped talking. A man at table 14 had lowered his fork mid-bite. Two women near the wine rack were whispering, eyes fixed on the scene unfolding. Bryce wasn't done. I've seen this before, he said louder. This chip on the shoulder, world owes me something vibe. It's exhausting. Maybe if you spent less time trying to prove something and more time actually doing your job, you wouldn't be stuck in a place like this. That was when the air changed. The words hung heavy, sharp. The restaurant didn't go silent, it went still. No clinking glasses, no fork taps. Even the jazz track playing over the speakers seemed to soften into the background. Nia didn't blink. She didn't flinch. But her expression shifted just slightly. That calm, serene exterior settled into something even more grounded, like a stone in a stream refusing to be moved by the current. And then she said it. Clear, soft, with no venom, no volume, no hint of emotion beyond clarity. It must be exhausting to drag that kind of bitterness into every room. It wasn't a punchline. It wasn't sass. It was a mirror. And Bryce Calloway didn't know what to do with it. The room didn't gasp. It didn't cheer. It absorbed it, like the line echoed against every wall and settled into every napkin fold and wine glass stem. Bryce opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Olivia stared at Nia as though she had just witnessed something sacred and sharp all at once. And still Nia didn't move. She just stood there, pen in hand, eyes steady, waiting. Bryce finally blinked, jaw tightening. Excuse me. You heard me, she replied just as calmly. Now would you like the salmon or the short rib tonight? Both are chef's specials. He stared at her, struggling to reclaim the upper hand. But the confidence, the arrogant sparkle in his eyes had dulled. He knew somewhere deep that he'd lost control. And what's worse for men like him is losing it without even being shouted at. Wow, he muttered. That's the kind of tone that gets people fired. A few tables over, someone exhaled audibly. The man at table 14 shifted forward in his seat, chin resting on one hand. Nia tilted her head. I'm doing my job, sir. If you'd prefer someone else, I can ask another server to assist. Bryce scoffed. Oh, I'm sure you'd love to walk away right now. Play the victim. Watch everyone rally around poor mistreated Nia. There it was again. the need to control the narrative, to twist grace into manipulation. But Nia didn't play into it. Actually, she said, still, even I'd prefer to finish this order and move on with my night. That struck him harder than anything. The idea that she wasn't trying to escalate or be remembered or make a statement. She just wanted to do her job, and he couldn't stand it. I want your manager, Bryce said louder now. Of course, Nia said, stepping back. I'll let him know. As she turned, Bryce called after her. Tell him I said your attitude is poison, and you're a liability to this place. She didn't turn around. Instead, she walked to the host stand where Tomas Rivera, tall mid-40s, clean-cut with a calm authority, was already watching. He'd seen the whole thing. Before she could speak, he nodded once. I heard. I didn't raise my voice, she said quietly. I know, he replied. Let me handle it. Thomas walked toward table 9 like a man walking through smoke, steady and unhurried. Nia stayed near the host stand, watching, not hiding, not eavesdropping, just breathing. From where she stood, she could see Bryce's hands moving animatedly, pointing toward her, voice sharp, but failing to cut through the tension he himself had built. Tomas stood still, nodding occasionally, his own voice low and firm. At one point, Olivia looked down into her lap and didn't look up again. After a few minutes, Thomas returned. He's displeased, he said dryly. Do I need to step off the floor? Nia asked. No, he said without hesitation. I told him he can either lower his voice and finish his meal like a guest, or he's welcome to leave. And we'll see what he chooses. But Bryce had already made up his mind. Moments later, he stood up with a loud scrape of his chair. The restaurant, still frozen in that heavy silence, watched as he threw his linen napkin on the table. You should be ashamed, he barked, not even looking at Nia. This place is a joke. Tomas raised an eyebrow. Sir, please. Bryce looked around as if expecting anyone to back him up, but no one did. Not a single face met his with sympathy, not even Olivia's. Are you coming? He asked her sharply. She shook her head slowly. I'll call my own car. That stopped him, just for a second. Then he turned and walked toward the exit, mumbling under his breath. And just like that, he was gone. But what he left behind wasn't silence. It was something heavier, something permanent. A room full of people who had just witnessed a man try to use power to humiliate someone and fail spectacularly. And a woman who didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't break. She just stood. Tomas stood near the front door for a moment, making sure it closed all the way behind Bryce Calloway. There was no slam, no final insult, no dramatic exit speech. Just a quiet click and the heavy weight of judgment hanging in the air like leftover smoke after a fire. Back at table 9, Olivia reached for her glass of water with hands that were far too still. She looked up at Thomas as he returned to the table and offered a faint smile like a peace offering. She didn't do anything wrong, she said gently. Not a thing. I know, Thomas replied, and thank you for saying it. Then he turned, walked over to Nia near the host stand and placed a steady hand on her shoulder. It wasn't for show. It wasn't performative. It was acknowledgement. You okay? Nia nodded, slow and sure. I am. Thomas gave her a short nod in return. You can take 5 if you need it. I'd rather finish the shift. He didn't press, just walked away to check on another section, leaving Nia, where she stood centered but not untouched. It was only then that the room began to breathe again. Forks lifted, glasses clinked. Voices returned, hushed and reverent, like people whispering in a church after witnessing something sacred. Something uncomfortable but true. A man at table 14 lifted his wine glass slightly in Nia's direction. Not a toast, not a cheer, just a gesture of acknowledgement. One she returned with a small nod. She turned to continue working. There were still orders to take, plates to clear, but the atmosphere had shifted. Every step she took now was followed by eyes not filled with pity, but respect. Not because she'd won some battle, but because she hadn't even tried to fight, and still she didn't lose. Near the bar, a young couple whispered to their server, who smiled and nodded. Moments later, that same server approached Nia and slipped her a folded receipt. From table 5, he said. She unfolded it, a $100 bill tucked inside. On the bottom of the paper, scribbled in black ink, were 5 words, for your grace and courage. Nia didn't smile. Not out of ungratefulness, but because she wasn't doing this for the thanks. She was doing it because this was her job, and because no one, no billionaire, no guest, no ego, was going to take that from her. In the kitchen, the line cook peeked his head out and raised his eyebrows. That the guy who yelled earlier? Yeah, Nia replied, setting down a cleared plate. He's gone. Good, the cook said, flipping a salmon fillet. Didn't like his face? Nia smirked a little at that. Humor-like breath was starting to return to the space. Back out front, Olivia remained at table 9, still quietly sipping her water. Nia approached cautiously. Would you like to place an order, she asked. Olivia shook her head, then looked up. I'd just like a glass of red wine, something dry. And, if you don't mind, I prefer to drink it at the bar. Nia nodded. Of course. As Olivia stood and moved across the floor, people watched her too. But this was different. She was no longer his guest. She had stepped out of that shadow. And as she sat at the bar, she folded her coat across her lap like she was settling in, not escaping. Later in the shift, as the crowd thinned and the dinner rush began to fade, Tomas gathered the team near the back. It was something he didn't do often, a quick huddle in the prep area under the low hum of the walk-in refrigerator. I just want to say he began what happened tonight could have gone a lot of ways. And the way it went, that was because of Nia. There was a beat. Someone clapped, then someone else. Not loud, not a standing ovation, but enough to mean something. Thanks, Nia said softly. But really, I just did my job. Exactly, Thomas replied, and that's what made it so powerful. By the time Nia clocked out, the tips on her table had doubled. Not because people pitied her, but because they recognized what she'd held in place while under fire. She was gathering her things in the staff break room when Olivia appeared again, coat on purse in hand. Mind if I say something? She asked gently. Nia turned. Sure, I should have spoken up, Olivia said. I usually do. But tonight, I froze. I've been around him too long, I guess. Got used to the way he talks, the way people never call it out. Nia met her eyes. But you didn't defend it. That matters. I still feel complicit, Olivia admitted. But I saw what you did. I saw how still you stood. And I'll be thinking about it for a long time. Nia nodded. Then maybe that's enough. Olivia pulled a card from her purse. I run a nonprofit, education access for young girls in tech. If you ever want to talk or help or anything, call me. Nia accepted it, sliding it into her apron pocket without looking. I appreciate it. Olivia gave a grateful smile, then left, quietly. Outside, the temperature had dropped. Early autumn was starting to bite at the edges of September, and the wind rolled through the alley behind the restaurant like it was carrying stories. Nia stepped into the night, not hurried, not slowed, just present. Just whole. She pulled her phone from her bag, checking the time. One new text. From her best friend Kiara. Girl, is this you attached? Was a link. Nia hesitated, then tapped it. It was a grainy, vertical video, shaky hands clinking silverware, hushed gasps. But the voice, it was unmistakable. It must be exhausting to drag that kind of bitterness into every room. The caption read, Waitress shuts down tech billionaire with one-line room goes dead silent. Thousands of likes. Comments pouring in, shares multiplying by the second. Nia stared at the screen, standing beneath a flickering alley light, her breath rising in white curls. She hadn't known anyone was recording, hadn't wanted the spotlight, but the world had already turned its gaze, and what it saw was not a spectacle. It was a lesson. Nia stood beneath the alley light for a long moment, just watching the numbers rise on her phone. The video had over 90,000 views within the hour. Her name wasn't in the caption, but the comments were already asking. Who is she? Where is this? That waitress is pure power. She didn't feel powerful. Not really. Not in that moment. She felt still, like her soul was trying to catch up with the wave that had already swept past her. Inside, the kitchen was closing. The last orders had been plated. The bar was being wiped down and the dishwashers were playing music low through someone's Bluetooth speaker. But Nia didn't go back in. Not yet. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Kiara calling. Nia answered on the second ring. Girl, Kiara said, no, hello, no pause, just an explosion. You broke the internet. I mean, are you seeing this? I saw the clip on Twitter, then TikTok. Now it's on Instagram Reels. with gospel music playing in the background. Gospel. Nia closed her eyes. I didn't even know anyone was recording. Exactly, Kiara said. That's what makes it gold. You weren't trying to go viral. You were just you. I don't want to be a meme, Nia said softly. You're not, Kiara replied. You're a message. The line was quiet for a beat. Then Kiara added, people are listening, Nia, like really listening. And she was right. By the time Nia got home, her phone was almost overheating. She had 24 missed calls. Her DMs were flooded. Her Instagram, usually quiet and private, had ballooned from 300 followers to over 8,000. On her couch, still in her work shoes, she watched another clip someone had reposted. Same video, but with subtitles. The words of her now famous sentence typed across the bottom in clean white text. It must be exhausting to drag that kind of bitterness into every room. The comments ranged from grateful to angry to deeply personal. She handled that better than I ever could. Black women stay saving the day with grace. We need to protect this woman at all costs. Someone get her a TED Talk. Another said she didn't yell, didn't cuss, just stood her ground. That's a sermon. Nia didn't cry. She didn't smile either. She just watched and tried to breathe. The next morning, Thomas called. We've had a few reporters call the restaurant, he said. Also, a producer from a local news station. Morning segment. I don't want to talk to the press, Nia said. I figured, just letting you know. By noon, a GoFundMe had been created. She hadn't started it. A customer from that night had. The title was simple, Support Nia's Future. It passed $10,000 in 3 hours. She scrolled past people saying things like, I've never met her, but she deserves everything good. Others left comments like, for my daughter, so she knows how to stand tall too. Somewhere between a forkful of cold leftover pasta and a bottle of lemon water, she received a new email. Subject line, formal apology on behalf of Mr. Calloway. She almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of her. It read, Dear Ms. Whitaker, on behalf of Mr. Bryce Calloway, we extend our deepest regrets for the incident that took place at Hollings and Pine. Mr. Calloway acknowledges his behavior was inappropriate and has since taken steps toward personal reflection and inclusivity training. He also wishes to make a donation in your name to the Marcy Youth Empowerment Center in Minneapolis. Nia didn't reply. Not right away. 2 days later, a courier arrived at the restaurant during her shift. He handed Thomas a small navy envelope sealed with wax. Inside was a check made out to the youth center for $50,000. A note accompanied it, with respect for the strength I failed to understand. Nia stared at it for a long time before folding it back into the envelope. This is real, huh? She said to Thomas. Very, he replied. That night, while drying glasses behind the bar, Thomas leaned over and said, We've got reservations all week. New faces, old ones coming back. People are asking for your section. I don't want to be a tourist stop, Nia said. You're not, he said. You're a reminder. There's a difference. And so she kept showing up, night after night, not because of the fame or the tips or the way people whispered her name like she was a legend, but because this was her space. One Tuesday evening, a local journalist slipped into a booth near the bar. Didn't ask for an interview, just left a folded note on the edge of the table as he walked out. It read, There are moments that define people. And then there are people who define moments. You are the second kind. But Nia didn't post about it, didn't tweet, didn't chase interviews. Instead, when the Marcy Youth Center invited her to visit, she said yes. It was a gray Friday afternoon when she stood in front of 20 teenagers in hoodies, headphones, and chipped nail polish. Most of them didn't look up when she entered. A few were texting. One was asleep with his hoodie over his face. She didn't start with her story. She started with theirs. How many of you have been talked down to? She asked. 4 hands went up. How many of you stayed quiet because you didn't want to lose something? Your job, your space, your respect? Almost every hand joined. Nia nodded. That's what happened to me too. She told them what went down, not the viral version, the real one. The way the words hit. The way her fingers stayed still even when her stomach twisted. The way silence can feel like both armor and suffocation. And then she said, you don't always get to control how people see you, but you can control how you show up. And sometimes your calm is your power. When she finished, one of the girls in the back raised her hand. What would have happened if you yelled back? Nia smiled softly. He would have won. The youth center visit stayed with Nia in a way nothing else had. It wasn't the kind of moment people recorded or clapped for. There were no hashtags or reposts, no applause at the end of her talk, just a quiet, thoughtful kind of listening. The kind you feel in your bones when people finally see you, not just as a story, but as a person. That night she sat in her living room with the lights off and her feet curled beneath her on the couch. Her phone buzzed again, another offer, this time from a brand she'd never heard of, wanting to collaborate on a campaign about dignity and digital resilience. It didn't matter what the pitch was. She deleted the email without opening it. Nia had made up her mind she wasn't going to turn this moment into a brand. She wasn't a spokesperson. She wasn't interested in being anyone's internet icon of the week. She had said what she said because it was true, because it needed to be said, not because it would one day be played on a loop over background music. On Sunday, Tomas asked her again if she wanted to take a few days off. She told him no. These people showing up, they're not here for the food, he warned. They're here for you. That can weigh on someone. I know, she said, but if they're coming to watch, then let them watch me work. I'm not a symbol. I'm a server, and I'm still on shift. That same day, a woman came into the restaurant, a white woman in her 60s with kind eyes and silver hair tied back in a loose braid. She waited patiently until Nia came to her table. I don't want to take up too much of your time, the woman said, but I just wanted to say something, if I may. Of course, Nia said. I taught public high school for 37 years, and I used to tell my students, you don't have to raise your voice to raise the bar. But sometimes I wondered if any of them ever believed me. She paused and smiled. And then I saw your video. Nia gave a polite smile. Thank you, ma'am. The woman nodded. You reminded a lot of us that standing your ground doesn't require stomping on someone else's. It just means not moving when you know you're right. After she left, Nia stood in the hallway behind the bar, just breathing. No tears, no drama, just that same stillness that had carried her through everything. Later that week, another envelope came, this one hand-delivered by the same courier from before. It was addressed simply for Nia. Inside was a letter from Bryce Calloway. It wasn't long, just 2 paragraphs. He didn't try to justify himself. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said that what she said had cut deeper than any headline ever could. He said he had started therapy, that the donation to the youth center was only the beginning, that he wasn't looking to be redeemed, but he was trying to change. Nia folded the letter and placed it in the back of her notebook. She didn't text him, didn't email, didn't respond at all. Not out of anger, but because some things don't need closure. They just need distance. A few days later, she returned to the youth center, this time not to speak, just to listen. She watched a young boy nervously rehearse a speech for his school student council race. Another girl practiced reciting a poem in front of her friends. No cameras, no retweets, just real life happening quietly the way growth usually does. Outside, as the sun began to set behind the city skyline, Nia stood beneath the wide-open Minnesota sky and just existed. For once, not as a story, not as a waitress, not even as a reminder, just as herself. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, one of the notes left on her table last week. It was written in neat, careful handwriting, probably by someone no older than 16. It read, "You showed me that silence can speak, that stillness can fight, that grace can win." She smiled at that. Not the kind of smile you force, but the kind that rises slowly like sunlight, warming your skin after too many cloudy days. The world had moved on from the video. The comments slowed, the shares faded, the headlines changed. But the impact didn't disappear, because someone had watched, someone had learned, and someone, maybe many someones, would carry that moment into their own lives. Not with fire, but with stillness. Not with noise, but with truth. Sometimes life places you in moments you didn't ask for, in rooms you didn't choose, with people who test your worth, just to see how easily you'll fold. But dignity isn't something you pull out when the cameras are rolling. It's something you carry quietly, like a steady flame in a storm. Nia Whitaker didn't plan to make a statement. She didn't craft a speech or choreograph her reaction. She just stood her ground with clarity, calm, and composure, when someone tried to reduce her to nothing. And that's the lesson. You don't need to raise your voice to raise the bar. You don't have to match anger with anger. Your stillness, your refusal to bend in the face of arrogance can echo louder than any shout. We live in a world that often confuses loudness with leadership and fame with value. But real power isn't in how many followers you have or how viral your moment becomes. Real power is being able to walk through fire quietly with your head held high and never letting someone else decide your worth. So if you ever find yourself in a moment like Nia's cornered, underestimated, dismissed, remember, you don't have to fight to be strong. Sometimes all it takes is one sentence, spoken softly, delivered with truth, and carried with grace.